Hello! What's up, everybody? Welcome to News, Games, and More, IGN's daily live news show. I'm Jamin Hatfield. Today I am joined by Stella Chung, Janet Garcia,
What's up?
and Zach Ryan.
What's up, everybody?
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and to everyone out there that's watching. I hope you guys are having a great day. It's a cloudy and windy day in San Francisco. I hope it is no worse wherever you are. Hopefully a little bit better. Lots to talk about today. What's on the docket today? Let me scan through our little document here with our run of show. We'll talk about a couple skateboarding games, Tony Hawk and Skate. We've got an update on those Game of Thrones books. When you're finally going to find out the real ending, not the terrible HBO ending. But first, let's start with the EA Play. Well, we've got some EA news, but we'll start with EA Play's presentation, which was last Thursday. I haven't got a chance to hear my friends' opinions and thoughts on that presentation from last week. Let's start with Janet. What did you think of EA Play 2020? Good show, bad show?
I thought it was solid. Like I feel like EA sort of always. I mean, EA is a very contentious place when it comes to gamer reception, but they have their stuff that they always come out with. As a FIFA fan, I always love hearing about the next FIFA game. I know it's not something a lot of people you're either into or you're not, but I thought it was solid. Like they came with the stuff they normally do, and then they're also teasing some things that I think are generally a little bit more interesting to people. So that's it's always an acceptable showcase, but it never really wows.
Gotcha. Stella, what did you think?
I mean, I really enjoyed the Apex stuff, so I'm a little biased. I really enjoyed it. I thought they did a good job showing off everything people were interested in, except for the Mass Effect trilogy thing that no one has heard anything about, which I would really like for them to address the rumors one way or another, but, I really enjoyed it. All the Apex updates went live today, so that's actually really cool that they were able to announce things so close to the release date, which is really nice. So it's like, you have things you can look forward to, but there are also things that are here now that you can enjoy.
I just love the lower thirds we have up right now. EA Play conference impressions. Good or bad?
Good or bad?
Zach, good or bad?
Bad. Not a fan, Damon.
So
Didn't love it.
So too.
Yeah, I thought it was really
Yeah, okay.
I thought it was really I just thought it was really weird that in a console transition year there was no real talk about next gen consoles. Like exactly. I love the Star Wars stuff. I loved Squadrons. I think that looks very cool. But I was hoping for a second Star Wars something. I was hoping for, like Stella was saying, something about the Mass Effect trilogy. I don't know. It just seemed like the stuff that they showed wasn't super impressive. And not. I don't know. There are years I think that we've seen previously at E3s where people have conferences and it's like, ooh, maybe you should have just sat this one out, man, and waited for a conference when you have bigger stuff to talk about, because with the exception of Squadrons, none of that stuff really moved the needle for me. And the Joseph Ferris stuff, man, I wish that they would quit trying to make that guy a thing.
I know, They even ran a whole sizzle reel of him being
about
crazy.
How great he is. Yeah, and it's the and maybe I'm a little off topic here, but
that's good.
He made one incredible game and one game that was fine, and the whole deal with him now is he's this WWE superstar. He's this WWE character essentially, where he's just constantly yelling and he's larger than life and he's friggin' jacked now, and I just I don't get it. I don't understand why that I don't know. The whole presentation to me was very strange, and I kind of think that they could have saved up for a bigger year next year or something like that, maybe.
Which game was the incredible one and which one was just fine?
I wanted to ask that too.
Brothers. Yeah, Brothers was the
incredible.
incredible game.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Get Out. Or not Get Out.
Way Out.
A Way Out. Yeah. I do that all the time.
Get Out is an incredible film.
Get Out.
Get Out is an incredible film.
I mean, I didn't play Brothers to its entirety, admittedly, but I played maybe the first hour or so. It's available on Game Pass. Once again, shout out to Game Pass. Super easy to play a lot of stuff. And it felt fine, but it felt like A Way Out. And maybe the gameplay gets really crazy or the story gets really crazy later on. But I felt like the gameplay of A Way Out was a lot more of an evolution on that whole idea. And I think having it be mandatory, I loved A Way Out. I definitely don't think it's if we're thinking of how we review things, I don't think it's an amazing game, but I think it's absolutely fantastic. And I'm really excited to see what he does next. I do agree that I think a lot of times game companies lean into that whole like, oh, we're going to be like quirky, or we're going to lean into like the memes. And I think sometimes that can be cringy, but putting that aside for a second, I am really excited to see what Hazelight and like his team do next, because I thought A Way Out was fantastic.
But Janet, you didn't think it was strange that like that Zach was saying that they didn't announce a single next gen game.
Yeah, that's probably. I mean, well, FIFA 21 would be next gen.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Oh, actually,
those will be cross gen.
Coming out in the fall, so it'd be cross gen. Yeah.
Yeah, those will be cross gen.
It's not ideal, but I don't think it was that shocking. Like when you really think of like, at least for me, like there's not that much from EA that gets me really excited. I feel like if you like some of what EA does, it's because you vibe with one of their staples. Like Stella mentioned Apex. I love FIFA. You know, I like their push for supporting smaller studios, which you get with Hazelight. So for me, I never expect EA to make a big splash anyway. So I'm like, are there a few things I'm into? Cool. If not, maybe that would be disappointing. But they've never like blown me away. So maybe I just have a lower bar for what I get for my taste out of EA.
Yeah, I get all that. I just like I was saying, I was just very surprised that they didn't even have a teaser for like something that might be coming to next gen next year. Just show a logo to the sequel to Fallen Order. You know, like that's all I would really need. And also, their big game this year.
Remember?
What's that?
Wait, who?
I was gonna say, do you remember when they announced Fallen Order with just the name in the crowd? Remember, like that was pretty funny. Like I think you could totally get away with something like that. Like, you know, somebody pulls up their shirt and underneath the second shirt is like Fallen Order 2, this thing, you know, like
Like the first shirt Fallen Order and the other ones too.
Just tattooed across your stomach in like gangster asshole English, just like Jedi Fallen Order 2.
But would you rather have that, like a tease of something, or would you rather have something that's substantial? Because maybe they are holding out, maybe they're keeping something under wraps until they have something more substantial to show, because everyone's been complaining like, oh, we didn't see the PS5 until just recently. Like, we don't know what half these games for the PS5 teased are. Like, I don't know what this is, but it looks cool. But, you know, like, do you think they must be waiting for something? Right? Yeah.
They must
I just think the way their development pipelines are lined up, all they could muster this year is a budget Star Wars game.
Yeah. Well, let's not call it a budget Star Wars game. It is a discount. It is a lower price Star Wars game, but that doesn't necessarily like when I think calling something a budget game carries a certain connotation, right? Like calling something budget typically means that it's lesser than, right, or inferior. And like we don't know what that game is like, and we do know that it is on VR and standard console play, and we do know that it has like 2 full story campaigns. And so like I don't know. I think like maybe just a precautionary thing. Like yes, it is a cheaper game, but budget is like maybe a little harsh.
But they've looked at what they're offering and decided to price it below a regular AAA game.
I do think if they're trying to like
fair.
Sort of edge into that VR fandom and that VR space, typically VR games are cheaper. I know this isn't like specifically just a VR game, but I think drawing from the VR audience comes with, in a sense, reducing your price. Just like a lot of VR experiences do not cost a lot. Like I think there's only, like I have an Oculus Quest, and I think there's only maybe 1 or 2 games I've bought full price so far. Like full price in terms of being a $60 game, versus that would never happen to me on a PlayStation 4 or an Xbox One.
Yeah. Stella, were you surprised that they made no mention of Anthem and what the roadmap is for that game?
I'm not super surprised. I mean, I know they talked about revamping it and redoing it, but I feel like, I mean, my take on it was that it was a little too late for that. So I'm not super surprised they didn't say anything about it. I'm surprised they didn't say anything about Fallen Order, because I would like a DLC or something like that. But I know they just recently pushed out the extra content, so yeah. Yeah,
there was a big update for it recently. Mm-hmm. Our good friend Forty, who's always great in chat, recommends maybe value priced game is better than calling it a budget game. That's fair.
That's fair.
Well, following up on the EA Play from last week, EA held a roundtable with its investors in a webinar today, or over the evening for us. And the CEO, Andrew Wilson, confirmed they're going to be doubling down on Star Wars games. His exact quote is, "We've got new generations of fans coming to the IP all the time. So our expectation is we think there continues to be a really, really strong opportunity in and around that relationship and that IP going forward." Now, EA has had the exclusive Star Wars license since 2013. It's 7 years. In that time, they've released 2 Battlefront games, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, and then some mobile games. So would you agree, Janet, that that's maybe seems a little bit light when you have the exclusive license to one of the biggest properties in entertainment?
I mean, I think that's such a hard question to answer, given I just don't know the workflow of how their studios go about getting these from idea to shipped. And it's interesting because Star Wars has always been this very like multifaceted IP. Even if you think of its origins, like you have the movies, but you also have like TV shows and like all these other avenues in which, and then in terms of the storytelling, you have like mainline versus stuff like, what they're doing on Disney Plus. So I think it's a little light in the sense that maybe you'd expect them to push it more because it is such like a easy pull in some ways, but we've also seen in recent history people kind of getting a little fatigued on Star Wars as well. So I think, especially given the reception of some of their efforts in terms of Star Wars, I think it makes sense for them to approach it kind of cautiously. I think Jedi Fallen Order was holistically a win from them in terms of sales, critical reception, and fan reception, which is, it's very rare to hit all 3 of those, even if it wasn't like to an astronomical degree. I think it makes sense for them to be careful because I think even Disney is seeing some of the repercussions of putting out too much content too fast. I mean, that's why, the whole Boba Fett thing, like they were gonna have like a movie or a show or something, that kind of went a little silent, and they're sort of revamping what they're gonna do with the franchise. And I think EA is right to be concerned about pumping out too much content too immediately and kind of wearing everyone down, especially when you kind of have to think of how it works in cadence with everything else going out in the Star Wars universe. Like, it having all these other avenues can be good for selling the game, but it can also be a negative. If people are tired of Star Wars, maybe pumping out a Star Wars game won't be beneficial to them. So I think it's smart of them to be cautious about it.
Yeah, but they're saying that they're doubling down on it. Like, Zach, how do you interpret that? Do you think that means they're just going to continue, cranking these out as they can finish them, or do you think they're going to try to increase their output?
Well, I don't know. I think that obviously they're exploring a couple of different paths, right? Like creating smaller Star Wars games that are coming out at a lower price, like we talked about with Squadrons. But they also confirmed that Fallen Order was the first in a new franchise, so that we know we'll see at least another AAA Star Wars lines. When they say that they're doubling down, I don't know if that means that they're just committing more teams to more projects, or if that means that they are like really investing in the quality of these games over quantity. I think one thing that we have to consider is the double down sandwich that was chicken and then other stuff and then chicken, right? And so is this sort of a Star Wars sandwich situation that we're talking about? Just something to consider. Just something I want to throw out there.
Yeah, I'm always considering the double down.
Are you just laughing at your double down sandwich theory now?
No, I just sometimes all these jokes can't be home runs. Sometimes you just pitch something out there and you whiff it. But
like,
it's okay.
The thing is that sandwich
shot your shot. It's okay.
In practice, which is like, I'm wondering if the metaphor extends further and if this results like going to be negative. To me, the double down thing is more like, and I don't know if it'll result in more games. I feel like it might, kind of like Zach was saying, like smaller experiences kind of, and in different kinds of ways to examine the Star Wars universe. But I think it's more like them voicing their commitment towards making quality games and making new franchises within this IP rather than necessarily like flooding the market with games.
Yeah.
Yeah. I felt like doubling down just meant that they were going to commit themselves to quality. Because Squadrons looks great. And the fact that they included VR, something that they probably assumed that people would want, I think that's pretty big of EA. Like I think they're trying to redeem themselves and they're trying to present themselves as, hey, we are trying to listen to the community more. We want to do what you guys want to see more of from us. And so I feel like that's something that they're trying to invest in. And I think their feedback from Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order was just huge. And I don't think they expected that. So when they say double down, I think they mean create quality content for Star Wars, because it's kind of missing. Like, it's kind of a genre that's not really been touched in a while. So
What genre? What do you mean by just the?
I just mean the story of Star Wars, because like a lot of people are like, oh, it'd be so nice to have an MMORPG that's Star Wars based again, because the last one has been like several years old.
Yeah,
Old
Republic?
like there's so many.
The Old Republic. Yeah, but they were doing Old Republic updates as recently as like 2016, 2017. So
it does seem like I guess it makes me wonder why this business setup is good for Disney and also good for gamers to have the property locked away behind EA, and so like whatever EA can sort of put together, that's what we get. Whereas if it was sort of open to everyone, and you could dole out the license to any number of developers to make different games. Ubisoft could make the open world action RPG, Assassin's Creed Odyssey style Star Wars game. Obsidian can make the Western RPG Fallout style Star Wars game, and then little indie developers can make really, really cool stuff. Imagine the Dead Cells style roguelike Star Wars platformer with awesome pixel art across all the Star Wars planets. Like all that stuff sounds so cool to me, but we'll never get that because it's as long as it's locked behind EA.
Mm-hmm.
That's capitalism.
All right.
Oh my God.
Disney owns Star Wars, so like once Disney bought Star Wars, I'm like, we're gonna get Star Wars forever, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. And sometimes that's really good. Like I think some of the stuff Disney has done with Star Wars is cool, and is stuff we wouldn't have seen if they hadn't acquired it. But I think you can make that basically analogous to the EA situation. There's stuff that we wouldn't get if it wasn't exclusive. But yeah, with someone buying an IP like that and owning it, there are things that we gain and things that we lose as fans. And, that's kind of like not really up to us. And we just kind of have to deal with it and react to it. And, hopefully it ends up being for the better of the franchise and for the IP, but there's really no way to guarantee it. And as long as it makes money, they're going to keep pumping it out. So.
Mm-hmm.
That seems reasonable.
I think the general conversation around Disney when they took over the Star Wars franchise was like people were very concerned, and we're looking at the precedent that they'd set with Marvel, right? Like they were pretty laissez-faire when it came to Marvel, but it seems like they have a heavier hand in the way that Star Wars is produced and thought about as a canonical franchise. Like,
Well, another announcement from EA Play last week that was exciting to some and confusing, perhaps controversial to others, was the announcement of a new skate game. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but first we'll talk about another skateboarding game. We got an update on Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 Remaster. Today we found out that the warehouse demo will arrive in August. It is on August 14th. But the way that they're handling it seems a little bit strange to me, because it's for those who pre-ordered the game digitally. They will get access to the demo on August 14th. So like the people who have already bought the game, they're the ones that get to try out the demo.
Why?
Super weird.
Yeah. And also the wording specifically says if you pre-order the game digitally. So I don't know if you pre-order maybe there's not a physical version of Tony Hawk 1 and 2. Maybe I don't know. I'm confused.
It definitely seems odd given that it's a remake of a very old game, and like their whole thing is that they're priding themselves on, really making that game feel as good as it did when we played it back on the PlayStation. So like, I do think it's funny that this game is getting a demo 1 month before, but you can only get it is it like just for people that are so excited for Tony Hawk, they're like champing at the bit to make sure that they get to play that warehouse level again? Because like I played that level a million times, and if given the option, I will skip it. Like,
wow, bold.
But I think you'll want to see how it looks with its fancy remaster graphics. Yeah, it's almost like early access then at that point, because you've already bought the game.
Yeah, but it's like if you buy the game, from what I understand, if you pre-order a game before it's released and before you know what it looks like, generally that means you are pretty dedicated to playing this game, or at least owning it for a little bit when it comes out. So for people who pre-ordered it and the fact that they get a demo, it really doesn't make sense to me unless they can extend that demo to friends. Because I know with some games, if you buy the game, you get a demo, but you can also invite like up to 2 friends or something. Which I feel like would be really nice for them, just because people aren't really sure what it's going to be like, and it'd be a great opportunity for them to be able to try it. But the fact that it's only for those who pre-ordered the game is really weird to me.
I think so too.
I wonder if it's like a weird marketing play where it's kind of like you might, if you want the demo, now you're more, and you're kind of on the fence, but you're sort of leaning on yes anyway. It's like, well, why don't I just, like for me, I don't really like pre-ordering games unless I'm pre-ordering physical and I just want to kind of put my money down at like a GameStop or something. But if it's digital, I'm like, take my $60 when I can get the actual game. Like I don't, like, why would I give you the $60 early? That doesn't, I don't want to do that. But maybe someone like me where I know I'm going to play the game, maybe that'll like push me over to get it just so that I could be part of the hype. I think also in terms of generating excitement for the game, if you only show the demo to people that already like it enough to have pre-ordered, they're, I think, generally more likely to be the ones that would be most positive about it versus someone who maybe wouldn't have checked it out at all, might check it out and kind of drag it potentially. I still think it's not, I don't think it's the right choice because I think there's still more value in them giving the demo to anyone and maybe bring in people they wouldn't normally have. But yeah, it's a very odd situation. I remember us talking about that when it was announced along with the, I think, collector's edition. And all these weeks later, and it's still weird.
I mean, do we think that the idea here is that maybe that your progress will carry over, and so if you're playing this demo, you can unlock, the second level from the day that the game launches? Like I kind of am interested in the early access angle. Like, cool, I just have this whole month to just kind of play through this first level, and when the full game launches, I can go right to the school, which is arguably the best Tony Hawk level. So.
Yeah, I'd hope so. Like, I hate when demos don't let it carry over because then I literally have to do the same thing I just did, and it frustrates the hell out of me. So I would hope that they'd at least do that, but I'm not sure if that's been confirmed or not.
Do the three of you pre-order games very often?
Never.
No.
Only physical and in pieces. I'll just put down $5. Sometimes I'll go back and throw in another 10 if I'm already there to like pick up something else, but that's basically it. Or if it's sometimes if there's like a really cool incentive, like I didn't do this for Animal Crossing because I was too lazy, but if you like pre-ordered at Target, you got like some stupid bell bag or a journal or something. And I'm like, yes, give me more garbage that I will throw away. Or like, I want my kids to be stuck with all this trash when I die. And they're like, what do I do with this statue of a mask? Like, that's the legacy I want to leave behind. So that's why I pre-order. Other than that, I'm not like a digital pre-order. I'm like, it takes me 2 seconds to, I mean, maybe the day before just so I can pre-install it. But other than that, like digital gives me no incentive. So I guess maybe at least this does give you an incentive, but it's kind of a whack incentive because it's usually used to show the game to people that wouldn't play it. But yeah, and I don't care about those stupid little avatars you get on your thing. Like I have no interest in that.
So Janet, what was the last game you pre-ordered?
That's a great question. I'd have to think of the last physical game I bought. I'm gonna say, oh geez, I don't remember because I get a lot of games for work. Like a lot of the games that I would buy, maybe Mario Maker 2. I don't remember pre-ordering that. I know I picked that up though, at least at Target physical, because they gave you a lunchbox with it if you did. Once again, just collecting trash. It's a nice lunchbox.
It's a perfectly nice lunchbox.
Something around that kind of vein is usually when I pre-order stuff. Or if for some reason it's like maybe a collector's edition and I'm worried that it would sell out, that's also a rare thing for me because how do I know if I like the game enough to want a collector's edition? So my only collector's edition is a limited run game that I already knew I liked. But yeah, that's my story.
It's good. It's good. I just think it's interesting.
Thank you for sharing. This is a safe space, Janet.
Yeah, this is a safe space.
Let me know in chat if you're also buying garbage all the time.
All the time.
Yeah, I'm curious. Let us know in chat if you do pre-order games. Like Stella and Zach, I hardly ever pre-order games unless it's like, I think the last time I did was Breath of the Wild because it was a launch game for the Switch and I wanted to make sure I got it at launch. A couple more details on Tony Hawk. It's going to have new skaters that were not in the original games. I don't know if you guys know this, but there have been new skateboarders since these games were originally released in the late 90s.
There's only Tony Hawk.
No, there's new skaters now. But of course, it's names that I don't recognize. I don't know. I could read them off, but I don't know that anyone is going to really know these people. And it is coming out. So the whole game's coming out September 4th, and it includes all the original levels, original skaters, new skaters, and then it's including the Create a Park and Create a Skater mode, which I think is interesting because that leads us to our next topic, which is Skate. We're leapfrogging back to EA for a little bit. there are some new details on Skate today that come from the same sort of roundtable interview that we got details on the doubling down on Star Wars. Andrew Wilson, EA CEO, also said, talking about Skate, the reason they brought it back wasn't because of people demanding it, but because EA sees an opportunity to integrate modern trends like user-generated content. The quote is, you take a game like Skate, and while skateboarding in and of itself has tremendous appeal to a huge global audience, there's another secular trend that's happening inside our industry around user-generated content, open world, and interaction. He shared a story about skateboarder Nigel Houston, who started as a skateboarder, but now is a brand that includes fashion and art. So Andrew Wilson says, for many people, you think about skating as a starting point that has appeal, but you start to build in user-generated content, exploration, and community on top of that, and that expands the opportunity exponentially. Zach, I wonder if you could take a crack at translating all that. What is he saying about the next Skate game?
I honestly,
we're waiting.
This whole Skate thing is pretty big mystery to me. I thought the whole announcement was very strange, the way that they did it. You know, nothing to show, kind of tacked on to the end of the show. Didn't call it Skate 4. You know, is it a reboot? And now this stuff about user generated content. Like, I don't think it's a bad idea. Like, I think that, you know, elevating user content in the same way that something like a Mario Maker would do is like a pretty great idea. You know, like highlighting creators that make cool courses or skate areas, you know, things like that. Like, I think that that's smart. But yeah, this whole Skate deal right now is a big question mark to me. Yeah,
I don't know why. How is user generated content going to be like the focus of the game?
Right.
I don't know. This is like something that people have been asking for a long time. But like you said, they didn't announce it as Skate 4. It could be a situation where it could be like a Mirror's Edge. I forget what the second Mirror's Edge was called, but people had been hoping for a sequel to that game for so long, and when it finally came out, it was kind of like,
yeah.
I think you kind of missed the whole point of why people liked Mirror's Edge in the first place.
Yeah, that was Mirror's Edge Catalyst.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think there is an appeal to user-generated content. I wish they had gone into more detail about it. That's definitely very important because, I mean, can you create entire maps from nothing? Like, because that's huge, because Fortnite started implementing that, and a lot more users were interested, because not many people were interested in doing straight-up Battle Royale. They were like, I built this Fortnite map to look like the Zelda dungeons, which is actually incredible. So if they have that level of customization, I think that could be something really cool. But is it just like, I found a table here, I'm going to push it over here. Boom, that's a ramp. Like, if it's like that level, then yeah, if it's that kind of level, then I'm not interested. But if it's something like, you know, big that you can actually craft into your own unique design, I think that's really cool. But again, they haven't really released any details. So
yeah, it's very confusing.
Yeah, it sounds pretty complicated to do user-generated content in a way that would be meaningful and enhance, I think, what Skate already offers, which is skateboarding, versus like something like Fortnite. It has a lot more of a, like, it's a lot more diverse than just the Battle Royale element, as Stella already pointed out. So it seems like their user-generated content sort of has a slightly different function than what I imagine a Skate version of user-generated content would. It also makes me wonder if the game is mostly that, because like basically the quote's kind of saying, "Oh, we decided to make this now that people are into user-generated content," which does kind of make it sound like it would be like Skate Maker, you know, essentially.
Yeah.
But the issue with that is like what Mario Maker 2 learned after Mario Maker 1 was that you not need to have a campaign, but that there's a benefit towards having a campaign. And I think that's one of the ways Mario Maker 2 really improved on the formula. So I think if they have something as a baseline and they add user-generated content, it could be meaningful. But the idea of that being the focal point is a little bit concerning. Granted, the communities are really great at making stuff. Like, I suck at making things in games. We've kind of talked about this before on the show, but like the idea of making a whole game in Dreams or even making a level in Mario Maker, I think I spent like 6 hours on a plane working on my Mario Maker 2 level, and I didn't get past like the first frame. It was a very like Ben Wyatt from Parks and Rec situation where I had spent this whole day making nothing. It's just not my strong suit, but the things that people can create always impress me. So maybe I'm kind of underestimating the community in that sense, but the idea of building a game where that's the focal point, it's a skateboarding game, I guess that gives me some concern in terms of, will this be what Skate fans really wanted? And again, the fact that it's not Skate 4, I feel like if it was Skate 4, they would have said Skate 4. So what is it? We don't know.
Yeah, that's a really good question. What is the next Skate game? We don't really know right now. But at least we have Tony Hawk 1 and 2 Remaster to look forward to. Let's move on. That's enough skateboarding talk. So much skateboarding. We got some updates on Bloodstained. We announced, there's a surprise announcement, at least a surprise to me, a sequel to last year's, I think it was last year, maybe it was 2 years ago now, Bloodstained Curse of the Moon. Wow, oh my gosh.
No, was it really? I thought it was last year because I did capture for it last year.
You're thinking of Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, which is the full-blown Igarashi game. Curse of the Moon was developed by Inti Creates and is an 8-bit game where you swap off between 4 different Castlevania boys.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, this game rips. Yeah, this game kicks ass. I'm so stoked for this. Yeah.
No, this is so my jam. I loved the original game. I love the idea of taking an 8-bit spin-off of a regular modern game as well. I wasn't expecting to get the first Curse of the Moon. I wasn't expecting to get a sequel to it either. So, and apparently they said it's coming soon at the end of the trailer here. So hopefully we're not going to have to wait too long for that. Yeah, so you played Curse of the Moon, Zach. And then did you play Ritual of the Night? And you ended up liking both of them?
Yeah, Ritual of the Night was one of my favorite games last year. I think that game is phenomenal. It actually ended up being way better than it had any business to be, I think. But Circle of the Moon was such a nice, just a tasty little hors d'oeuvre, such a nice little throwback.
And then Stella played Ritual of the Night, but not Curse of the Moon.
No, Ritual of the Night was my first Bloodstained game. So
right. And did you like it?
It was fun, actually. Yeah, I really liked it. I usually don't like side scrollers because I'm just terrible with them. And I have not finished the game because I got stuck on a certain boss and I hate him and it's annoying. But I really liked it. I was interested in the story. The voice acting is very corny, but I think that's kind of endearing in a game like this. So I enjoyed it. For someone who doesn't like side scrollers, I thought it was pretty good. Like, it engaged me. So.
Would you be interested in an 8-bit spin-off that's a little bit simpler?
Yes. If it's a little bit simpler, yes, please.
Simplicity is appealing because this type of game is always kind of hard. I don't think it's a side-scrolling thing, Stella. I think this is just like a hard game and that's kind of one of the values of it. I haven't played either of these games yet, even though I do like Castlevania, so it's definitely on my list, but it's fairly low down. Not because of anything it did wrong, just because there's a lot of stuff to play out there. Yeah, but I think the sequel does me. Yes, exactly. The classic. I think the fact there is a sequel, though, does kind of make me think, oh, maybe I should play the first one then so I can kind of catch up and be able to be on that wave.
The cool thing about this is that there's multiple characters. Each one has their own abilities, and you can switch between them on the fly. And each one has their own health bar. So you have to sort of be smart. Yeah, you have to be smart about how you use them, when you use them. And one of the characters in this one is a character named Hachi, described as a corgi who pulverizes demons by controlling a colossal suit of magic armor. Yes, I know, right?
Damn.
I know.
Did you just describe the game of the year for 2020? Incredible.
Did you describe heaven?
Yes.
It also sounds a lot like Kirby Planet Robobot. That was basically why Kirby Planet Robobot was cool, because it was Kirby in a mech suit. That was a good game.
Okay, but this is a corgi in a mech suit.
This is a corgi,
They had similar names.
I love animals so much. Anyways.
No, it's good. Anyway, Bloodstained Curse of the Moon 2 looks very cool. Coming soon. Let's move on. Let's move on a little bit beyond video games to talk about Game of Thrones. I know. What year is it? George R.R. Martin. I know. George R.R. Martin has been hard at work on the next book.
There he is.
The Winds of Winter. Oh, no. Winds of Winter is the next book. This is in the Song of Ice and Fire series. And he's been quarantined during the pandemic in a cabin, just doing nothing but writing, apparently. He posted a blog entry assuring fans he has been staying healthy and he's been consumed with writing. His quote is, "I have to confess, after half a year of pandemic, quarantine, and social distancing, I am showing signs of cabin fever, half of which is quite literal in my case. Yes, I am in an actual cabin in the mountains. No, I have no fever. Yay, for the present at least, I am healthy. For an out-of-shape guy of 71 at least, and doing all I can to stay that way." He says, "If nothing else, the enforced isolation has helped me write. I am spending long hours every day on the winds of winter and making steady progress. I finished a new chapter yesterday, another one 3 days ago, another one the previous week. But no, this does not mean that the book will be finished tomorrow or published next week. It's going to be a huge book, and I still have a long way to go." And this is not even the last book, the last planned book in this series. There's supposed to be one more after that. So I guess my first question is anybody still interested in the book versions of Game of Thrones?
After the ending, yes, absolutely.
Well, I heard a no and a yes.
Better. I want something better than what they gave us.
Better than the ending of the HBO series.
Yes. I will read the entire series just to get a better, more satisfying ending.
Yeah. Jen, did you say no?
Yeah, but that's just because I said no. Yeah, I just haven't. I'm not interested in Game of Thrones. I didn't watch almost any of it. I think I caught half of one episode. I did try reading the first book. I found it incredibly boring, just painful to read. But the caveat there is I don't really read a lot of fantasy, which is not to say that all fantasy is. But when I tell people that I don't like it, a lot of them were kind of like, "That's how fantasy is," and I'm like, okay.
Fantasy is boring.
He wrote a lot. He wrote a lot of words there. So not particularly interested.
And then Zach, where do you come down on this?
Yeah, I've read all the other books.
Wow. Okay.
I watched the show twice, with the exception of the last season. I don't care anymore. I don't care. Like the thing about these books is that I believe that they're based, like the ending of the show was based on the bullet points that George R.R. Martin gave the producers. Like, hey, these are the next points that's going to happen here. So like, if we know those basic plot points, like I just can't imagine reading another however many thousands of pages.
Don't you ruin my hope.
Characters that I'm like I just don't care about anymore. Like it's just like there was so much good stuff in those first few seasons of Game of Thrones, and then really blew it.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. I think maybe George R. Martin, even if the final seasons were based on his notes, maybe he would be able to sort of connect them all in a more satisfying way, because the show was great until it sort of veered away from the books. So I think I'm with Stella. I actually haven't read any of the books, but if this book comes out and people say it's good, I might be tempted to read it so I could have something to replace the ending of the show in my mind. Just something to think about instead of what happened on the show.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh my God.
What was that? What was that?
It was a picture of a trash can.
Or
a recycling bin, actually.
Look, it's the last season, guys. We can't just show this. This is spoilers.
Man, we're going to get a copyright strike on that. That's just Destin being a little prankster behind the scenes. But George R. R. Martin is also apparently working on a video game. Does anyone remember Elden Ring?
Oh, yeah.
Hell yeah.
That was announced
you know who really remembers
last year.
You know who really remembers Elden Ring? The IGN audience, baby.
Here it is. Yeah. This was announced at E3 last year. It's from Software, your Souls boys, and it's supposed to be sort of fantasy Souls-like game with world building by George R. R. Martin, but I don't think we've gotten any updates since E3 last year.
Ooh, it's creepy.
That's correct. Yeah.
I think this is definitely
I think it looks awesome.
I can't stop looking at the hand that's twitching.
Ooh, yeah.
The old twitchy hand.
I love a high fantasy. I love a dark fantasy setting. I love Dark Souls. This is a very Zach Ryan game. I'm excited to play it. Excited to find out more about it. The end.
Well,
that's it.
And those are all my thoughts. Yeah.
I imagine this is probably like a decent way away, just because what we saw was so like vague, but like cool looking, you know. And I think this definitely seems like a next gen play to kind of, you know, if we're thinking of FromSoft kind of having these different like pillars of what Souls like can be for them. If this is like the next entry in those pillars, I imagine that there'd be something like, I don't know, early to mid gen of next gen. So yeah, it seems cool. I don't really play Souls games, but I know a lot of people like really love them, and this looks interesting. So, and clearly these are like this is like a talented group of people building this thing out together. And collaborations are always cool. So it'll be interesting to see like the different ways that people that are fans of the genre or these creators kind of can, you know, pull threads from it.
Zach, are you excited for the Demon Souls remake?
Yeah, I've actually not spent a ton of time with Demon Souls. Demon Souls, the first in the Souls series, and definitely like very clearly a prototype and a very difficult game to go back to, you know, however many years on. By the time I got into the Souls games around Bloodborne, Demon Souls was already a pretty old game, and so when I went back and tried to play it, I just was not having a good time. But you know, Bluepoint is an amazing developer. They do really, really cool things with their remasters and remakes. And they've said that this is much more than just a simple coat of paint. Like they're really looking at the mechanics and the way that the game feels and you know, some of the things around that I'm super stoked. I think that would be just such an awesome game to have on PS5.
Okay, we're going to check in with our, I'm going to reach into our mailbag here. We've got a mail from one of our fans. It's Piyush in India. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Writing to us from India, and he's writing to us about The Last of Us Part 2. So I want to assure everyone right off the bat, there's not going to be any spoilers here. We're not going to spoil anything about Last of Us Part 2. But Zach, you did just beat it last night. Is that correct?
Yes, I did.
And it's fine. Took a little victory lap.
Yeah, no, it's
Janet beat it a long time ago because she's working on the guide for IGN. I just started it last night. I played probably the first 90 minutes.
Spoilers, right?
No spoilers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Again, no spoilers. And then Stella has not played any of it yet, right? It's just sort of letting everybody know where we are. Okay, so our friend in India writes in and says, I decided not to buy The Last of Us Part 2 and just to watch the entire cutscenes on YouTube. It felt like watching a big budget emotional drama. I was satisfied with the story, the acting, the visuals, but I don't think I will ever play the game. Do you think games like these, where the story overshadows the gameplay, might be losing some revenue from people like me should these be released as a movie on Blu-rays or on digital because there's no revenue going to them from people who just watch the cutscenes? So I guess, first of all, Zach and Janet, as people who've beaten the game, how would you respond to someone who just watched the cutscenes and felt like they got a satisfying experience out of that?
I would say I would prefer, like, I think it's better if people play it. I think it is a very story heavy game, as is the first game. And I think if you know that, like, you're just not going to play it, you just don't want to spend the money or you don't want to put in the hours or whatever, and you're like, if I don't watch it, I will not experience this at all, then I think, sure. Even though it's not how I would want to experience it, and having played it, not how I recommend people experience it. Hopefully you watched a good edit, because like I actually am a nerd that will watch game cutscenes on YouTube, sometimes for games I've played, sometimes for games I haven't played, where I'm like, you know what, I don't feel like playing this, but I'm interested in the story. Like I could see myself doing that for like some of the Mafia games, because I think some of the gameplay doesn't age that well, and the story was interesting, so I want to see it through. Hopefully you watched one that had some of the gameplay spliced into it. Like there are some, the fact that I know this is like very dorky, but like there's a difference between just throwing the cutscenes all together and adding in just a little bit of gameplay to kind of contextualize those cutscenes, which granted I think the game does well already, so it's maybe not as hard of an edit, but the benefit of playing it versus watching it, even though you're getting the same story, is you have time and space to kind of let your mind wander as you're like exploring the world and kind of thinking about the characters and the narrative and where it might go. And if you're just watching it, you don't have that downtime, and you also don't have that experience of like having, you know, moments that are where you're afraid or whatever, or where you're like stressed or where you're excited or getting, also, especially with a game like Last of Us, one thing they do so well, even just referring to the first game, is having dialogue during all of the gameplay. You know, you'll see something on the side and a character will comment on it. You'll go through optional areas. Like, I think it'd be very hard to capture the entirety of the story of even Last of Us 1 in cutscenes, because you'd be missing so many of, you know, you won't hear Joel explain ice cream trucks to Ellie, because that would be an extremely long edit. So that's why I wouldn't recommend it. But if you're not going to play it at all, and you just know you're not, or you also just don't care about having it spoiled. Like, my brother has been listening to spoiler casts for this game, even though he's probably going to play it, and I'm like, don't do that, and he's like, I don't care. It's what I want to do. I think it's totally valid to do.
Zach, how about you?
Yeah, I think I kind of have I won't say controversial opinion of Naughty Dog, but I have a different opinion of Naughty Dog in that, like, I think that they make incredible, like, groundbreaking next generation stories. I think they are incredible storytellers. I think their games are, like, pretty good. And I've always thought, you know, like Uncharted, The Last of Us, like, I really, really love those games as a whole, but I always feel like the gameplay does come second to the cinematic stuff. And Last of Us 2 is no different. Like, all the cutscene stuff is so insane. And I totally get what Janet's saying. Like, there's a lot of stuff that happens just during the gameplay portions. But honestly, like, I feel like The Last of Us 2 is an amazing game, but it would be an even better game if, like, 1/3 of the encounters were cut. So I think this is a totally viable way to experience that game. I don't think you necessarily need to do 6 stealth rooms and, you know, 5 boss encounters and all this stuff to get to the next cutscene. Like, I think that you're totally fine. Not that that actually happens in that game that way. That's ridiculous. But you know what I'm saying here. Like, I think that you're totally fine just watching those cutscenes if you're not interested in playing what is genuinely a pretty difficult stealth game. Like,
yeah, I suck at stealth.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. You're going to ask me something.
No, I wanted to get your thoughts on just all of this and just the idea of watching cutscenes instead of playing a game in general.
Right. So I just recently finished The Last of Us Part 1. Right? I guess it's Part 1. The first one, basically. And I suck at stealth. So everyone's been warning me, you need to get better at stealth for the second game. And I'm like, oh, great. This is going to suck. And I actually didn't think about it before. Some people might be like extremely casual gamers who don't feel confident enough to go through a game and not get frustrated at certain points. Like, I got very frustrated. I was playing the game on normal difficulty, and there were a couple of points that I got stuck because I felt that the enemies, some of the mechanics were just not really fleshed out fully. And I just felt like I couldn't continue until I took a break and then came back to it. So I do understand the frustrations of gameplay kind of pulling you out of the story and the experience. But if you sit down and watch the cutscenes and, you know, the gameplay that's within context, I think that works. If you're genuinely just interested in the lore and the story, I think the overall story, I think that's not a bad way to go, especially for a game that has a pretty great storyline like The Last of Us. If it was something like Detroit Become Human, I think that requires a playthrough, or even Mass Effect, right? Because you can pick so many different paths that you can go, and it's so unique to your playstyle. I would say that's very different. If you want to watch like all the different endings, like, that still wouldn't be enough because there's so much that happens in between. But for a game like The Last of Us Part 2 or The Last of Us 1, I think it's totally fine to, like, watch it through. And I think that commenter does have a point. Like, they totally could just turn it into a movie, like release a movie cut and, you know, maybe charge like $5 for it, you know?
Yeah. Is anybody excited for the HBO series?
yeah.
Excited is a strong word, but I'm definitely going to watch it. Once I figure out if I have access to HBO and then cheese my way into getting access to HBO. But yeah, I'd be interested to see what they're going to do with it. You know, whether or not it's going to be a one-to-one of the games, or if they're going to veer off into other facets of The Last of Us as a universe and, like, other characters and things. Like, I'm curious as to what that looks like.
Stella, you said you just finished the first Last of Us recently. Do you have a plan to play Part 2 soon?
Yes. So I'm giving it kind of a week breathing room because I know a lot of people, I'm playing it on stream, so I know a lot of people don't want it spoiled. So I'm kind of giving them that room to play through it, and then they can come and watch. So, yeah.
Seems like a really difficult game to stream to me. That seems like a really tough game to try. Because
I don't actually think... That, like, you know, Stella, you said people told you have to get better at stealth. I really don't think you do. I personally I did find this to be like a harder game in the sense that you couldn't just start clubbing people and make it through like that, like how I did with Last of Us 1, both playing on normal for both the games. But like the tool set is improved, so it's easier to execute on ideas or plans you have versus the Last of Us 1, like some of the stuff wasn't as refined. So like part of it was maybe that I wasn't as good at stealth, but also like if I got caught, I just shot everyone and threw some things and it was fine. Versus like The Last of Us 2 is harder in some ways, but I feel like the tool set is better, so it ends up being kind of like I felt like each of them were kind of equally difficult for me personally, even though I was around the same skill level because I played them almost back to back.
Yeah. Zach, I was curious. Why do you were saying you're explaining why you thought it was a hard game to stream?
Well, first of all, like the brutality of the game itself is just like really tough to watch, and secondly, like it's an emotionally draining game. Like it just like, yeah, I don't know. I don't particularly feel like I get too like emotionally invested in most games. This game like wrecked me. Like by the end of this game, like I was so invested in these characters. Like it really, really had not a profound effect on me, but like, yeah, it really affected me. Like I really, last night after I finished it, and there's multiple times during the game where I had to like stop playing. Like I had to put down the controller because something was so ugly or so brutal or so like challenging that it was just like, I gotta take a break for a while. You know, like there are choices and things that you have to do in that game that just like, yeah, just messed me up. But good luck streaming it anyway.
It's more exciting than crying on stream. Are you kidding? Like, I feel like it'd be a fun game to share with other people. Like playing it before it came out, like as much as that's like a privilege, but also it's for work. So, okay. But like, it's lonely playing a game early or if no one else has played it, especially one that's like story driven because you don't necessarily always have people to talk to about it. So I think it'd be like, as long as, you know, there's a risk of spoilers if you're streaming, like if you get trolls or something, but like sharing that experience with other people is like, I mean, I like doing that with games in general. Like I think it'd be a super fun game to stream and like to see people's reactions to and to like react like alongside it. Like that's just my take on it.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Do you think, like, Zach, you're talking about how brutal it is. And again, without any spoilers, do you think the makers of these games are actually trying to say something about humanity? Like trying to say like this, when things get really bad, this is who we really are. I know this is getting a little bit heavier than we normally do.
I mean, I think that's the underlying thesis in a lot of like post-apocalyptic literature and art, right? Like a lot of what the draw to these kind of games is watching the human spirit be pushed to the brink, right? And like with The Last of Us Part 2 in particular, like I feel like the story, the attraction to what's happening with these characters, things like that, is like the same reason that you watch a Breaking Bad or a Better Call Saul, right? Like it's just, it's good people making bad choices and, well, I guess good people is a relative term, but like these characters are making choices and have to live with the ramifications of those choices. And like things just keep getting continually worse. And it's one of those, like in Breaking Bad, like you just can't look away. Like you have to know what happens next because like something so awful will happen and you're like, God, it can't get any worse than this. Like this is so bad. Like it can't get worse. And then it does inevitably get worse. Like,
Wow.
I think The Walking Dead had a quote that really like pertains to every single post-apocalyptic world. Or at least zombie world. It's a fight the dead, fear the living. And I think that's just like a pretty gold standard within zombie apocalypse universes.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Well, like I said, I just barely started the game, so I look forward to playing more. I think we got time for another mailbag edition here. This is from Steven in Rhode Island, who writes in to say, this is about Star Wars Squadron, which we talked about at the very top of the show today. They said, the announcement that Star Wars Squadrons will not have any microtransactions or updates has really soured me on the game. I've been waiting for a game like this for a very long time, but the fact that they have made clear that there will be no microtransactions has me worried If they aren't confident enough in the title to support it on the tail, then why should I be excited to play this title? Battle passes, season passes, limited time events, etc. have really increased the amount of fun I've been having in games lately, as it keeps the community around longer, shakes up the meta, and gives me something to earn and achieve. Without this, I fear that the game will launch, the community will have fun with it for a month, and then lose interest as more game modes, ships, and other content will be coming. What do you think? Am I wrong to want microtransactions in Star Wars Squadrons?
It's an interesting question. Yeah, it's an interesting question. Like, I think he makes a really great point about what that statement means for the support of the game down the line, right? Like, I think that coming out of the gate and saying like, hey, no microtransactions, no, cosmetics, whatever, means definitely like telegraphs like, hey, this game is kind of a one and done situation. And so like, I think that that's an interesting point, and honestly not one that I'd considered before. But microtransactions as a whole, I'm not a super huge fan of, so I'm totally fine with a game not having microtransactions.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, but just not having microtransactions doesn't mean that there wouldn't be, it doesn't necessarily mean that there wouldn't also be like a season pass or a battle pass, right? I guess I just think of those things as different.
Correct. Yeah, that's fair.
I think it's interesting because... Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, Stella.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think it's interesting because since I work so heavily with Battle Royale games where the whole thing is free to play with microtransactions, I think it's so interesting to hear someone say they want it, right? Most of the time it's people saying, please get rid of it, like EA, loot boxes, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So I think maybe EA is, again, trying to listen to the majority of the community and kind of pull back on all the microtransactions they've been putting out. And you're right, Damon, this doesn't mean that there might not be like cosmetics they could purchase or maybe like packs or something, but maybe they just won't have loot boxes or I don't know, maybe there will be a season pass or something implemented in the future.
Yeah.
But I think it's just such an interesting take because I'm so used to everyone being upset about microtransactions.
Yeah. Janet, how would you respond to Steven from Rhode Island?
Yeah, I mean, like, is it wrong to want that? No, in the sense that, like, that's kind of just an extreme, it's not an unethical request or anything. Yeah. But yeah, it is unusual because most people, like Stella mentioned, don't want that in their games. I think it's an interesting zag to say that you feel like not having that is a bad sign. If anything, I think it's more of a condemnation on how EA has rolled out a lot of their games where like they're so known for it. Like now it's suspicious if it's not there. I think that's more of a commentary on the public stance with EA games rather than like EA's faith in an IP. Like I feel like, there's people don't make games thinking that they're going to fail. Especially like studios of that size, like they think it's a good product. It's not like, I think it's a little bit paranoid to think that the lack of microtransactions means they don't believe in a product. I think pretty much everyone that's shipping something believes in what they're shipping. There's the old saying that even bad games are extremely hard to make, and every game released is basically a miracle. I think that also the other way to think about it is sometimes like these things have seasons, right? Maybe it's this game doesn't have microtransactions, but another game like within that Star Wars IP will. And that whole idea of having certain maybe franchises that are more experiences and campaign focused versus having stuff that is more multiplayer focused that maybe does lean more into microtransactions, and being able to like clearly establish that for players so that they kind of know what they're getting before it's even out, I think is beneficial towards how EA is going to go about marketing their Star Wars games in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting to think about. Like Stella said, you don't hear people wanting microtransactions very often. We'll find out more about Star Wars Squadrons as we head on into the year. Zach, you just beat Last of Us Part 2 last night. What are you going to play next?
I'm going to take a little break. I do this, like, rarely do I storm through a game like that, and I played, like, nearly 30 hours in the course of 2.5 days. I just jammed that game. So I'm going to take about a week off, I think, and then pick something else up. But yeah, I got to give myself a little break after that game, I think.
I guess you only have a couple weeks or so until Ghosts of Tsushima. So that's exciting.
Yeah, that's true. That's probably the next big thing that's probably the next big thing that I'll play.
And then still, I said you wanted to put a let about a week go by and before you jump into Last of Us Part 2. So what are you going to play until then?
My staple Apex, but also I just got God of War for my new used PS4, so I'm very excited.
Oh wow!
Because I really
you haven't played it.
God of War.
You haven't played it yet? Oh man, you're in for such a treat.
I'm so excited!
Yeah. Such an awesome game. And Janet, what have you been playing lately?
I didn't just finish Last of Us 2. I finished that a while ago. Then I was working on the guide. The guide's already published. Right. I'm just kind of editing that up. For games, my next game is probably going to be another guides game. So that's all I'll mention on that front. But my next other game that I can mention would be I've just been doing some Oculus Quest stuff. I've been trying to like play stuff that is more chill because like I game so much for work because I do guides and like I spend more time in these game worlds than like anyone else. Like our team spends a lot of time looking at one specific game and then we deep dive into another game almost immediately unless it's like a down season. So like, that's very taxing. It's a lot. So in between, I've been playing just stuff on Apple Arcade. Like I was playing Tint, which is like a painting puzzle game, and then just Oculus stuff, Moss, Beat Saber. I recently got it, so I'm like digging into that library mostly.
Very cool. I think the Oculus Quest is awesome. That is about all for our show today. Thanks for hanging out with us on this Tuesday afternoon. We'll be back at the same time, same place tomorrow. Thank you to Stella, Janet, Zach, and that notorious prankster Destin behind the scenes. My name is Damon. Well, goodbye.
Thank you.
Just kidding.
He's at it again. Destin.
Oh my God.
We'll see you guys tomorrow.
Bye, everyone.